Hi, and welcome to another episode of Your Wealth and Beyond. I'm your host, Andrew Raffel, and today we have a remarkable guest who's carved his path through entrepreneurship, adventure, and a lot of success. Captain Travis Rosbach, a man of diverse talents, is here to share his entrepreneurial journey, love for adventure, and the unique compass that guides him personally and professionally. Welcome to the show, Travis. How are you today?
Well, I'm well. Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
You know, the Your Wealth and Beyond podcast is all about building wealth, but most importantly, finding passion and keeping that passion going. And today, I think we're going to dig into a lot of your unique story as a serial entrepreneur, being part of a lot of companies, but then also some of your diverse talents as we focus on adventure and things of that nature. But, you know, as we think back to your early days of when you got this entrepreneurial bug, can you walk us through what happened when you knew at that point that, hey, this is what I'm destined to do or have the passion to do?
Well, I grew up in Salem, Oregon, and my mom was recently divorced I was about age 12. And we were literally eating government cheese. We were not doing all that well financially. And the next door neighbor house sold, and a really wealthy man moved in. He had a beautiful car and he could afford landscapers. And it was kind of fun just to watch landscapers come and do work, because that was typically my job. But then he died. He died very soon after he moved in. And his sister came to do the estate sale, and she told me I could have anything in the house. And I found a bookshelf that was just like glowing. It was just like radiating at me. And I was like, I want that. I want that bookshelf. I want all those books. Turned out to be Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, all these people I'd never heard of. I had no idea what it was or what it was about. And it was like I walked through a doorway into another realm, like another world of not science fiction, but it kind of like this other world that I'd never experienced or ever thought about. It was business and success. And then fast forward to 14, I was in the Virgin Islands meeting my dad for the first time, who owns scuba diving shops. And with that, I got to take those Brian Tracy lessons and try them out at the actual cash register, doing the actual ordering of t-shirts and hats and sales and marketing and all of it. And I was like, this is cool. I really enjoy it. This is what I want to do. And so, I took off, and I had a few other side hobby project careers, but always just keep coming back to entrepreneurship.
So that glow, let's go back to that bookshelf. So I got a vision of like Pulp Fiction when they opened the briefcase. Now, I'm sure it wasn't your soul, but like that's interesting that it just kind of you just vision right into there. And I assume up to that point, with the struggles that you guys had as a family with, putting food on the table, that this was something that none of this was taught to you up until that point. You didn't have any mentors or somebody to look up to at the age of 12 until you started getting into the book and reading some of the legends.
Yeah, no, life up until that point was pretty rough. I had an alcoholic, drug addict, ex-Vietnam Agent Orange stepdad from 5 until 12. And so those years were pretty dark. They were pretty rough. And so when this bookshelf, like it literally did start glowing. It was the darndest thing. And it must have just been the way the light was hitting it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever it was. But it just was like, it was like a magnet that just drew me up the stairs. And I knew I had to have everything on there. It was like, it was the source of that man's wealth. He had beautiful watches and art. Like, who has art? Like my 6-year-old brother would paint and would put it on the refrigerator, but this man like paid for artwork, and it was just incredible. And I could sense that it was emanating from this wealth of knowledge that was stored in this bookshelf. And I loved the content too. I really found it really fascinating.
And then fast forward a few years later, so went and lived with dad, and helped him then on the scuba diving side of not just learning how to scuba dive yourself, but trying to help him run a business? You were able to put kind of from the power of the readings in those books into, wow, I can put into reality.
Exactly. Yeah. He would take off in the summers from the age of 14 until 18, when I finally graduated high school and I got back down home to the Virgin Islands. He would take off. The summers would get really slow, not a lot of tourists, not a lot of business. And he would leave. He'd go off to go play elsewhere and leave me in charge of the dive shop. I'd get the money bag, the keys, and the shotgun. And it's like, I'll be back in September. Oh, okay. And there I am trying to put all of these business teachings that I'd read about into actual reality, and loving every minute of it.
It was your own MBA program without having to be in debt 120 grand.
Right. Yep.
So this love for adventure then, with scuba diving, and I know also commercial airline pilot. What else on the adventure side have you done? And is that one of the areas that's kind of, as we talk about your entrepreneurial career, did you look at trying to tie the adventure side into what was one of your passions into the other? Did they kind of, transverse into each other?
They did. I remember very early on standing on the dive shop deck and meeting people from all over the world who had paid really good money to travel to Cane Bay specifically to go dive on the wall. We had a really steep wall that dropped off just a couple hundred yards offshore. And I remember thinking, wow, these people pay good money to come here to do what I do every single day. How do I live a life of getting paid to do what other people do, pay good money for to do? And so that scuba diving kind of trickled into the boat captain. I got my 50-ton U.S. Merchant Marine captain's license, got on the yachts. I was running big yachts, and then I go from the scuba diver level up to the billionaire level and meeting those types of people. And when I became a pilot, I started out at the airlines. Well, I started out flying skydivers, to be fair. And then I ended up at the airlines flying seaplanes, St. Croix, St. Thomas, and Puerto Rico with Seabourn Airlines. But when I got to Florida, I was flying private jets. And then I got to see, okay, like I was making 35, 40 grand sitting in the front of the plane while the guy behind me is worth billions. I'm like, I'm never going to be able to sit in the back of the plane if I stay up here in the front. So what do I do to get in the back of the plane again? So, and that's right when sort of that entrepreneurial itch came back in.
Do you remember in any of those times with all of those diverse people, successful people, driven people, do you remember any advice that any of them gave to you that resonated as you started on your career?
I do. I don't know that I could paraphrase all of it, but I do really remember. I wanted to also just absorb the energy. Like, how do they walk and talk? When I became a pilot, I found that there were two types of people. There were those who wanted to really learn how to fly the airplane so they could fly airplanes, and then they're going to go fly airplanes, and then they're going to go to the airlines, and they're going to fly airplanes. And then there was the other type that were pilots. And those pilots were pilots, and those pilots were pilots and pilots. They were pilots, 24/7 pilots that happened to fly airplanes. I became a pilot that flew airplanes, and just that slight psychological shift got me from my training to the airlines a lot faster than those guys who were flying airplanes. And so when I was with the billionaires, I thought, okay, like, what is the mentality? What is the mindset? How do they walk? How do they talk? How do they act? How do they treat me? How do they treat the people around me? And I could start to really see the people who have hundreds of thousands of dollars chartering a plane, to millionaires and how they treat people chartering a plane, to billionaires and how do they treat people chartering a plane. So I got to see those different levels of wealth. And instead of just being like, okay, I want to be 100,000-aire that charters a plane, I don't necessarily want to be a billionaire. I don't like that idea. That's not really for me. But I do enjoy how the billionaires sort of treat people and how they carry themselves better than the 100,000aires, if that
Definitely.
makes any sense. I don't know. You of all people would probably understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You're around a lot of the same folks.
Definitely. It's sometimes, money definitely was probably a driver for you. You wanted to be more successful than what you had grown up with, but tying in and making sure that what you're doing day to day is keeping you happy, and, also finding that where you're helping others, so, that's ultimately, I think, where a lot of people will focus too much on the money, and then they may grow a successful business, but they're just miserable people.
Absolutely. And after selling Hydro Flask, I met a lot of those people. I met a lot of wealthy people, I've spent time with a lot of celebrities who are so miserable. They're so depressed, can't go into public because of the depression and because of multiple other reasons as well. And wealth can be very isolating, and it's not easy to become wealthy. There's no quick, easy path. There's no book with 10 steps in it to become a millionaire or successful even. And I found anyway, that oftentimes people have to make great sacrifices to become successful, to become wealthy. And a lot of times that happens to be, excluding themselves from the normal society at large.
Yeah. Most entrepreneurs,
that can be alienating. Yeah,
definitely can. And as you more successful, more money, more problems, who do you trust? Are they just in my life because they need something? And it's trying to keep that antenna up, which is ultimately, a struggle day by day, I think, that people face that have been very, very successful. Before we jump into the Hydro Flask story, what was, after you did some of these adventure things, you kind of learned the ropes, met some interesting people, what was then your first really foray into growing a business? What did that look like? Where was it? What type of businesses was it?
Yeah, my first legitimate registered business was actually in Florida, and it was probably right around 2005, maybe 2004, 2006, right when Florida real estate was starting to really go up. It was right before the top and then the down. When it was going up, I had a girlfriend at the time, and we started we were going to buy houses and fix them up and flip them. That was kind of the cool thing that was starting to come on the TV, was, buy it, fix it, flip it. And you can make billions of dollars, and you can have fun doing it. And, I got to use my hands, and I got to do that kind of fun stuff. And it sounded great. It looked really good on paper. The numbers looked good. But then when we actually went to sit down with a woman who was losing her home to foreclosure, and we're offering her pennies on the dollar, and she starts crying at our lowball offer, it was like, I kind of don't like that. I don't want to do that. And so that was the first, and it was the absolute most unsuccessful. I made no dollars off of that. It was called Paradigm Properties. And with that, decided to leave Florida, leave that all behind, moved back home to Oregon and started a fence company, learned about how to build fences. And then I was like, okay, these are my people. I can do this. And that was my second one, was kind of like my real business, my first real business.
Yeah. I call it, going back to the real estate, once I call it the taxi cab test. Like, you're in Vegas and the taxi cab driver's telling you that he just bought 5 homes, no money down, and he's going to flip them. We know the end is very close, right? So, and then gold, and anytime you have but it's kind of nice for you to have that failure so early on, because you don't have as much responsibility and you can learn from it, versus where a lot of people got into a lot of trouble back in 06, 07, 08, and they lost everything. So for you, good to always have failures, because we learn from them and we learn what we don't want. And then getting back to the roots of, okay, I'm here, I'm building something that is a tangible niche product, but you felt at home, at peace in growing that, huh?
I did. There was something very honest. It was an honest, hard day's work, going out at 6 o'clock in the morning in 20 degrees and drilling holes in lava rock to put a fence post in, and handcrafting wooden fences of really high quality material. And it felt good. And then pretty soon we had about 25 employees that were feeding their families, and we were all kind of one big happy festive family having, fiestas together. And I enjoyed it, but it's really difficult to use the body in 20-degree weather drilling holes in the aforementioned lava. So that got old, but it was a good, honest way to earn honest money.
So you became, in a sense, an accidental business owner having 20 employees, but you were still out there working along with them, doing the hard labor.
I was, yeah.
Yeah.
Like out of 25, you're going to have at least, 3 to 7 that statistically just aren't going to show up the day you need them to show up at the place where they need to show up, because it's the hardest day of the week. And that's why they don't show up. So that puts me there in that position. And I enjoyed doing the estimates, and I enjoyed doing the sort of collecting the check at the end and dusting off the handle on the latch on the gate. But realistically, I was typically the one running the jackhammer or the skid steer or post hole diggers, even worse. Yeah.
So then next on the list, after you built this up and said, what, this isn't necessarily what I want to do for the rest of my life. What next business, like how did you look in the mirror and say, okay, what's next on my agenda? What's going to make me happy? What's the niche? Like, did somebody guide you to your next business?
Well, so at that point, I got to a very real cold afternoon where I was like, look, I'm going to kill myself or kill somebody else. I'm going to end up in prison. I cannot run at this pace much longer. I need a vacation. It'd been close to 13 months and I was still, digging holes. So I called my partner and she's like, okay, I'm going to buy you a plane ticket. Where do you want to go? I said, Mexico or Hawaii. And she's like, okay, cool. And then about 3 hours later, she's like, you got to get home. I packed your bags. You got to go to the airport right now. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I go home, get my bag. I'm heading out the door. I'm heading to the airport. Like, where am I going? You're going to Oahu. Like, I don't know much about Hawaii, but okay, cool. I'd never been. I'd always gone back to the Virgin Islands. I'd never gone out to Hawaii. And I end up in Hawaii. We just touched down and I could feel the aloha. I was like, I am home. And I called her and I was like, hey, look, you can sell the business. You can keep it. You can stay. You can go. I don't care. I live in Hawaii now. And she's like, where are you? Are you drunk? Who are those people around you? Are you at the bar? I was like, no, I'm still on the airplane, but I know I live here now. And 2 weeks later, we had the business sold and we were in Maui, not Oahu, but Maui. And I was training to become a business broker and I just kind of stumbled into business broker. There was a guy who said he'd train me and I could work with him. And I showed up in Maui and he's like, yeah, I'm going to train you and then you can buy my company. I was like, no, I'm not here to buy the company. I'm here to work with you. He's like, yeah, no, I'm selling the company. That's why you're here. You're here to buy the company. I'm like, no, man, I'm not buying your company. He's like, oh, well, then you're like, I'm not training you then. I'm like, well, that was never the agreement. And so left Maui, went to Oahu and became a business broker at that point in Oahu.
And did you find enjoyment in that? Or was it something that you knew you were just kind of biding your time until something hit that you knew was the right move?
I enjoyed the learning about business. That's the part I really enjoyed. Like there were some really good books. I got my real estate license in Hawaii in the state, which was great because I got to push myself. I had my contractor's license in Oregon. I had all my ATP and commercial licenses, and I had my 50-ton license and my dive licenses and all that. So I enjoy getting the real estate license. I enjoy getting my business broker license and learning about it. But the guy I was working with wanted me to hand out a business card with my name and his phone number on it. And I was like, no, man, I take issue with that. Because if I'm going to take the effort to extend my arm to hand somebody something, it's going to be for me, not for you. No, I'm going to run everything through. You run everything through me. I was like, nah, I'm not doing that. So I lost interest in that. Started working downstairs from his office, happened to be an exotic luxury pre-owned used car dealership selling Maseratis and Ferraris and Lambos and stuff. And I did that for a little while. I saw behind the scenes, I saw in the auto body shop how bad these cars actually were. And I didn't last at that either. That I didn't feel comfortable selling somebody something that I knew. I just saw it yesterday in the back, behind the curtain, and you don't want this $80,000 Maserati, even though you're saving 300 on it. Like, you don't want it. So I didn't last. And then just kind of stumbled into the sign world at that point.
Yeah, the sign world. So I have a good friends out here that same thing, fell into the sign business. I think their first day of business once they took it over was like 9/11, 9/12, 2001. And sign business is a unique, fragmented industry. They've definitely over the last 20 years turned it more into sign, but branding and working nationally and building these things out. So for them, they enjoy it because it's creative juices flowing. Now they've got like 80 employees. But were you finding in that end as you kind of keep going back to learning and not know, at this point you've kind of had a lot of different things, but you keep learning, you keep focusing on this end goal of trying to hopefully build something that you're passionate about that's actually gonna, be a winner. Did you sign business? Was that a good learning experience for you? Was that just another kind of climbing up the ladder to your personal success?
I actually really enjoyed it. With Bend Fencing, we would buy, the Carhartt jacket that had the embroidery from the ASI lady, and we'd go to her house and she'd screen print the shirts and she'd do the embroidery. And it was really cool to have the business cards and the brochures, the door hangers, and all of that from the woman who did that. And she was a great help and a great benefit to Bend Fencing. But then with the Wahoo Signs and screen printing, I got to see behind that curtain also. Like, where do you get business cards? How do you get business cards? What is what is Photoshop? What is Illustrator? What is the, secret to getting an embroidery done on your jacket? How do you get a hat? Like, where do you buy hats? So I got to learn that side of business from the substrate side of things and the Pantone side of things and the copy side of things. And I loved it because it was very relevant to marketing, very relevant to sales and branding. And then the more we got into the branding and marketing and sales side of things, we kind of grew into an agency that was helping brands. A lot of MMA was just starting to take off. And we helped a lot of the fighters kind of grow their brand. And we had even like local Dahui was one of the brands that was they were kind of becoming a big deal, and we got to help them print and make banners and posters and T-shirts. And I loved that. I really did.
Yeah, and Hawaii is a special place. We just actually got back from Kauai. We love that island, just so peaceful, and feel at ease when you're there, and the beauty, the laid back. I know some areas like Oahu not as laid back, but at least Kauai has that feel to it. So I would say most well known to the masses as the founder, creator of Hydro Flask. I think back to growing up, and I grew up in Cleveland, but it didn't matter where you grew up. We didn't have water bottles, right? What did we do? We drank out of water fountains. I don't even think there were water bottles, right? Hoses. Mm-hmm. It's amazing to see. I have a 17-year-old, and I don't ever see her without her Hydro Flask or Stanley and whatnot. It's just like they're carrying those things around. But so a lot of the listeners would love to hear of all these different trajectories that you had, which is constant learning, integrating yourself, figuring out what you like, what you don't like. So where did the idea come from for Hydro Flask?
Well, when I was in Bend as a student pilot, I was a rock climber. Also, I worked at a rock climbing store, Red Point Climber Supply, to pay the bills in the interim until I could fly for the airlines. And I knew this brand that was plastic. It was a water bottle, and it was single use. Like, we could reuse this water bottle. Yeah. And so one day I'm driving around doing errands in Honolulu, and I was thirsty. I see a sporting goods store. I pull in to get myself a water bottle that's not going to eventually wash up on my beach. We've been cleaning plastic off of the beach every day that we lived in Hawaii, and it was really getting old. And I go in to get this water bottle. None of the employees really wanted to help me. None of them really wanted to talk to me. There was something going on with the water bottles. And finally, one of the guys took me back. He showed me the whole wall, and the whole wall was empty. All of the bottles were gone. There was like maybe like two or three left, but the whole wall was empty. And I said, "What happened?" He's like, "Well, there's this stuff. The owner of the store is French. She just got back from Europe. We're not sure what it is, but it sounds scary. It might kill us. So we just decided to pull all the bottles." I'm like, "Well, who's going to fill up the shelf now that it's empty?" He's like, "Nobody. There's nobody else doing water bottles except for that brand." And it hit me in the cerebellum. It came out my mouth. I'm going to do that. And he laughed at me. And yet I saw the future. I saw like 10 years down the road. I saw very clearly myself in this like goofy jacket up on stage at a liberal college in California talking to people about this highly successful water bottle, which ended up happening about 10 years to the day later. so that's where the like initial hit came from. And then at that point, it was like every time I'd turn around to do something other than water bottles and try to focus on the sign company, I just got like smacked in the face. "No, Travis, you're doing water bottles." And so I was like, "All right, well, I guess I got to do water bottles."
So this is, because this is at that point, there really wasn't anything like Hydro Flask. You had the idea. This is where a lot of entrepreneurs, they have the idea, then they don't know what to do next. So what did you do next once you knew that this is going to work? I see myself 10 years later, this being successful, me talking at this college, which actually happened. What to get us in the mind of, okay, I've got the idea. What did you do? Not to the technical details, but like what happened next for you to start running and making this thing into the success that it became?
Well, we had a client at the sign company who would go to China to the Canton Fair, which is a big open market where the factories come in and they say, "Hey, look at us. We make water bottles, or we make pianos, or whatever you need." The Canton Fair probably has it. And I asked him, I'm like, "Hey, could I go with you on a field trip to the Canton Fair? I want to get these water bottles that stay hot and stay cold." And he did some research and he came back. He's like, "No, you can't come with me. There's no such thing. And that's a dumb idea. Nobody really wants to buy that water bottle." I was like, "Please, like I'll pay you." And he's like, "No, you can't come with. That's a dumb idea." And I was like, "Well, I gotta do something about this idea. They're not made in America. There's no factories. I've checked. There is one stainless steel single wall factory or company in America at that point, and they're made in China. Let me talk to China." And I found a bottle company who's like, "Oh yeah, we can totally do that. Come on over and let's hang out and create this bottle together." I'm like, "Okay, cool." So I sold my surfboard, sold my moped, sold all this stuff, took off to Shanghai. 2 days later, I'm in the factory and they're like, "Oh, we do plastic." I'm like, "No, I don't want plastic. That's the point. You said in the facts you do metal." "Nah, we're not doing that." And so basically, long story short, I started in China trying to figure out how to find a factory that would take a gamble on making something that nobody really wanted to do.
And I mean, how do you even go about doing that? Is it you get connected with, or are you just pounding the pavement and just with the language barrier too, just trying to express upon this is going to work? But is it just like trial and error and hitting your head against the wall until you find the right company?
It was tough. I mean, like the very first, I only had one factory contact, and this was about 2007, 2008, and there wasn't a lot of English being spoken at that time in China. There weren't a lot of Westerners actually there in China. And so when the first factory didn't work, I thought, like, I'm done. Like, there's nothing else for me to do here. And yet I have 9 more days. What the heck am I going to do? And it was a very sad, lonely feeling at that point. I was very disappointed, but I'm walking out the door of the factory and a guy just came up. He grabbed my arm. He's like, very broken English, but cousin Hanjo. What about that? Like, go see your cousin in Hanjo. I don't know what that means. Okay, cool. How do I do that? And he wrote down how to get to the train station and how to get to Hanjo, and that was all I had. And he gives me these two pieces of paper, calls his cousin, and it's like, "Hey, watch out for this Westerner guy, white guy coming." And so the next day, I am at the Hanjo train station with like 200 million other people, but I was the only white guy. And and this lady came up and she's like, "You must be Travis." I'm like, "Oh, thank God. Yeah, who are you?" And the next day after that, her husband and I took off to Yin Kong in Jinhua area where metal is produced. The cutlery and elevators and everything else that's made out of metals predominantly in the Jinhua area. And we were just knocking on doors of factories that we thought could maybe make this double wall vacuum insulated water bottle. And nope, we don't do that. So then we ended up knocking on the doors of the little roll up door factories where there's like 3 generations of family members living inside this one little room. And they're making screws, and we get the screws from them and we take them across town to build this machine that builds a part, and that part we take over to the other side of town, and the other side of town they build this other part, and then pretty soon we've got this bottle, and hey, look, bottle. Not going to do it. All right, so we go back to the drawing board, and finally we found somebody who's like, "Yeah, you can have 1 hour, or you can have 1 run on this vacuum, and 1 run takes about 24 hours." They're like, "You can have 1 chance." I'm like, okay. So we put them on, and they held the insulation, and we're like, "This could work." So
and then off to the races. At that point, did you have, because I always like to hear about company names, especially branding side and when it's out to the consumer. At that point, did you have the name Hydro Flask figured out, or was it not until you got it into this mini production, then you're like, "Oh my, this is going to work. I got to come up with a name"?
Yeah, we did not. I just knew I wanted a really badass water bottle. I wanted something that was really cool. And that was that was the only single focus that my mind had. And it wasn't until I got back home to Oahu and the factory called and they're like, "Hey, we need a name and a logo." I'm like, "For what?" They're like, "Well, we want to show you that we can screen print on the bottle. And it seems like if you're going to be a brand, you kind of need a name and a logo." Oh, yeah, that's true. And so we started the brainstorm session with all the friends and family and neighbors in Ohana that we had. And my brother, we came up with the word hydro. That was kind of like one of the early answers was the word hydro something. My brother comes up with flask, and I was like, "Nope, I hate it. That sounds like the Burnside Bridge. It sounds like whiskey. Nope." And China's like, "Well, we need something." Okay, fine. Just put Hydro Flask on it, and we're going to change it as soon as I come up with a better idea. And so actually, I had the first one. It has a wave on it, and like that was the very first logo and Hydro Flask. So yeah.
And it just grew on you then. You're like, "You know what? We're in."
Well,
The name.
people started saying, like, "I love the name." Like, really? I think of whiskey and I don't like whiskey. It gives me a headache just thinking about it, but okay. And so there's a point. It's like, okay, well, you have to listen to the consumer. And if the consumer likes it, you got to let it go.
Awesome. So all of a sudden we have a product, this vision product becomes at least getting it manufactured. And then the growth did it, entrepreneurs always want to hear about, what was the stumbling, what, beyond kind of like luck, which you had, hard work, maybe a guardian angel, the gentleman that you saw outside there. It's like all these different things put together there. But then what was some of the biggest trials and tribulations that you faced as you were growing it from 09 into you, and we'll talk about selling it and what happened after that. But what was that, and how did you stay motivated during those times?
Well, I think one of the first big hurdles that we faced was success. It was a go from from scratch. Like as soon as we had the prototypes, we knew that this was going to be something big. The people we would show the prototypes to didn't want to give them back to us. And they wanted to like physically, like, what can I pay you to keep this sample? It's like, no, you can't pay for it. I only have two. And so I had, I'd studied all of this business. I'd been in business. I was a student of business, and I learned how to sell and market and do all of this. But the thing that I had not really studied and learned was if you don't sell enough, you're going to go out of business. Yes. But if you sell too many, you're also going to go out of business. And that was I hadn't really thought about that. And so the bottles still to this day are about $5.50 from the factory each. And 5,000, now that's not too bad. You can, we could come up with borrowing and begging and selling everything we own for 5,000 bottles. But when we started doing 120,000 bottles a month, holy cow, like how do you pay that kind of money every single month? And that was quickly the biggest stumbling hurdle block that we had. Was we were a product of too much success.
Yeah. And nowadays we hear about that, and a lot of it, like when you Shark Tank was probably just coming online, but you hear about, wait, you're successful, but I'm not, because I can't afford, in the inventory and all the things you just talked about. And it's a good problem to have, but definitely a problem if you don't have the right resources itself. What was the first major carrier national brand? Do you remember who was that you got the Hydro Flask into to take it national?
It was Whole Foods. Whole Foods
Really?
was day one. And it was my very first stop. We just got our first Whole Foods in Bend. And I wasn't really privy to what that meant. I just knew, hey, there's a new healthy, crunchy granola store in Bend, and it's over by Costco. I basically live in Costco, so I see it, and I'm like, I'm just going to go ask those guys. As soon as we got our first order, I walked in and we got Whole Foods. And then once I got Whole Foods, it was easy for me to go across town to Newport Market. It was easy for me to go to, the next place, and the next place, and the next place, because, well, Whole Foods has them. So everybody else in that space wanted it. And then I did the same thing with the sporting good industry. We started out with a good friend of ours, Trudy, who is my mom's neighbor. And we've been friends with Trudy. She owns Mountain Supply, which is an outdoor gear store. So we get in with Trudy. Well, then it's easier to get in with Dan at Pine Mountain. And then Dan at Pine Mountain has it. Well, it's easier. And then next thing you know, we're at Dick's and REI and Cabela's. And it's just like, holy cow, hold on. Here we go.
Here we go. Here's the rocket ship is taken off, and now we need 100,000 orders, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Exponential growth. You obviously a serial entrepreneur, but what led you to selling the brand? In what was it? You grew up for 3 or 4 years before you kind of divested of it.
Yeah, it was like, here's my goal list. I want to be at this store, this store, this store, this store. And it was a long list. Like I had a lot of goals. I wasn't going to be happy until we were in that micro specific location. And as soon as we started getting international, and the international facet of the company came online, I was really excited to go spend time in Europe and in different parts of the world with the brand and with the company. And that's what I really enjoyed doing after a while. I didn't like having to deal with as much as I loved our CFO, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about the numbers. I don't want to talk about that side of the business. I just want to sell bottles. That's all I really wanted to do, is sell more bottles. I wanted to be the ambassador for the brand, really. And yet there was just so much growth and just so much going on that we needed to get big money coming in order to fund it, because we had the accounts. We just didn't have the money to give the bottles to those accounts. And so when we found an investor, actually an investor found us. It was a very much a miracle that that I was able to meet our investor. And when he came in and he's like, all right, look, we're here, but if we want to go there, this is what we're going to do. Here's the corporate playbook. And I wasn't interested. I wasn't interested in going corporate. I'm not really a corporate guy. And he says, well, you don't have to wear a suit and tie. I said, yeah, I'm still not, I'm still not going to play by the corporate rule book. Sorry. And so it was a very, end of season type of feeling. It was like, okay, I've accomplished everything I set out to accomplish. I've got a great water bottle. We have competition. We have knockoffs, which is very flattering. And I appreciate that, because let's face it, people are drinking more water at the end of the day because of them. I think I'm done here. And I didn't have interest in running a 125 person business. It just didn't. I wanted to go play on the far side of the world.
Yeah. And that's, that's looking within yourself, your character, and knowing what you're driven by. And, it's interesting to see where you kind of, baby was born, got the baby through childhood, and now it's off to college. And a lot of people may have, I think, felt that it's not right, but they just continue chasing. And then ultimately they wind up, could be at the end of 10 years or 5 years, being like, what did I do? This so for you, following your gut, it sounds like it's been kind of the mantra from you from the beginning, is like, follow your gut. And did you have regret? I wouldn't say regret, but when you see that it then sold exponentially later as they grew it, was that where yes, the success is great, but did you have any ping of regret that you didn't hold on?
No, I would have just been doing it for money at that point. And I'm not money motivated. That doesn't drive me. I care about money very much. It's very important in a, capitalistic society. And I'm very much capitalistic myself. And I think we live in the greatest nation on the planet, in the world. And yet I'm not chasing money. I'm not for sale. That doesn't motivate me. And so when it went on, I mean, they pumped a lot of money into it. It takes a lot of money behind the scenes to have a very big exit. You have to put a lot of money into having a very big exit. And what they did was they were able to buy more supply, more stock, more bottles, just more inventory, and then fulfill those orders. And when I think about all that it took to be the CEO and be the owner of the company, like I didn't want to do that times 20. No, yeah. I'm glad. Like, that's not my role. My role, what I enjoy, my lane, is building the brand, building the business, going through those hard times, and then like knowing when to say when, and let that more corporate CEO who stepped in and he ran it the corporate CEO way that I had no interest in. Yeah. But he had no interest, and the investor definitely had no interest in coming up with the idea or going through those hard times, going through that growth. And so I was elated. And I think that's what the newspaper article said. I was elated the day that it sold, because I knew that, like, back to that baby scenario, like my baby did well, yes. Like got a good job and went off and did something with herself. Yeah. So that was good feeling.
Yeah, no, that's tremendous advice for the listeners to take, because, so many follow things for the wrong reasons. And, again, money is not the driver of all things, and finding happiness and knowing who you want to wake up day to day and know what drives you. And that moral compass of both living personally as well as business is tremendous advice that I think drives you now, right? Because so now, as you've exited a lot of these different things, as we finish up today, what is driving you on a daily basis to get out of bed, to come on a show like this? What's in store for you now, and what do you see the next few years to keep you happy?
Well, I just switched over from the Tumalo group to travisrosbach.com. And at travisrosbach.com, we're starting to build courses. I'm doing a lot more advising, one-on-one coaching and consulting. And I still really love building businesses. I love building brands. clients. I just don't want to show up at the office with a bunch of employees. But if you want to tell me about it, and I'll help you with that, and you go do that, I'm happy to do that. And so that's what I'm doing now. I'm doing travisrosbach.com, which is, I'm kind of just doing the Travis thing, really. I'm doing business, and people want to do business. They want to grow a brand. Then yeah, let's hook up and let's go see what we can do together. And I'm stoked. Like that's what I love doing.
Yeah. You found your lane, and that's the most important aspect. What about on the adventure side? What are we up to these days? We doing anything else? So we still diving, we flying, rock climbing. What else we got on the plate here?
Well, I have a child now, and so I've had I'm not skydiving as much as I used to, and I'm not going off on these wild African safaris like I used to. And I would never shoot anything with a gun, only a camera. Jimmy John and the GoDaddy guy shot with guns, but that's not mine to judge. I am cutting trees. I have a bunch of property, and there's this invasive species called juniper that sucks up all the water from the native ponderosa. And so I'm helping out my friends, the ponderosas, get some of the water from the junipers. And cutting massive trees that, because growing up in Oregon, I never would have thought I would have said that I was cutting trees. Like I was hugging them and kissing them. Like I was a tree hugger, and all those loggers are bad. Well, a juniper is really just a big weed, and cutting these weeds is I know it's able to kill me, and it keeps me on my A game. It keeps me in my my micro focused area, just like riding a motorcycle or flying a jet would, it'd keep me focused. And now chainsaws do that.
That's funny how it goes full circle, where you got people to drink a lot of water, and now you're taking away the tree that's sucking away the water. So it's all full circle there.
Oh, that's interesting. I never put that together. Yeah.
Lastly, so if you were to give some advice, I know you're coaching, you've dealt with a lot of entrepreneurs, you've been in businesses, successful, failures, so forth. What's one piece of advice that you can give to a listener that's an entrepreneur that has a goal, has a vision, has a dream? What would that be?
I think I'd say keep going. We live in the greatest nation for entrepreneurs, and we need entrepreneurs more than ever. If we're going to save this country and we're going to grow this country back to where we were and where we can be, we need entrepreneurs. Please keep going for the rest of us. And just stay strong, because there is light at the end of the tunnel, even though you can't see it necessarily.
Yep. The small businesses drives this country. You hit it right on the head there, 100%. Well, this has been tremendous. We walked through a lot of things, a lot of intersection of both the adventure, both learning as a child from what you kind of wanted to grow into. But I think the key is staying true to yourself, staying true to your values, and finding what makes you happy. So pretty incredible chapters that you've had so far. We're looking forward with your new venture of being able to build the brand, the coaching brand the right way. Below in the show notes, we'll have ways people can get a hold of you, but it's tremendous. I think you're doing some really good stuff, and you're going to be able to provide the insight and the value to a lot of business owners that hopefully will have the same success that you had. So continue that great work. We do appreciate you being on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been good to talk about this, and I appreciate that juniper water full circle. I had not thought about that, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm glad I could bring something to the table today, Travis. Thank you.
Cheers.
Wonderful. We'll have a great rest of this year, and listeners, stay tuned for a new episode of Your Wealth and Beyond. We appreciate you, and happy planning, everybody.